I guess that's the cue for us to start. Welcome, everyone. First of all, I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Vice President of the Federation of European Publishers, Phaedon Kidoniatis, who will give you a couple of words of welcome to this presentation.
Good morning, dear friends, colleagues, dear all. On behalf of the Federation of European Publishers, we have the pleasure and the honor to welcome you here today to this presentation of statistics of ours. It has become kind of an annual event, kind of a tradition, and we are very happy for this. As you probably, most of you know, we are the voice of book publishers in Europe, and one of our core missions is to represent the interest of book publishers and to advocate policies that benefit the whole publishing sector. Towards that end, we collect data, we analyze data, we try to make interpretations of data for two reasons. First of all, to understand the trends of the European book market, to try to understand at least. And second, to be able to structure arguments that will help us support our advocacy efforts. We are very grateful to our members, to the publishing associations, and all these people who share their data with us, so we can have a more complete picture. We ask more people, more publishers and organizations to share data with us. And we are also very grateful to our Deputy Director Enrico Turin, who for the last few years, every year it's improving and hopefully it will continue, who is doing all this hard work for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phaedon. And so, without further ado, let's get going, because this is going to be an even richer presentation than the other year, so you're in for a treat. Actually, curiosity, how many of you are here for the first time for this show? Wow, okay. Well, I hope you'll enjoy it, but also those who have seen it for a few years. There's a lot of new stuff. I hope so you'll appreciate the news. So let's get going. First of all, just a reminder. So this is the FEP Traveling Data Show, brought to you by FEP, Federation of European Publishers. You see there, if you can distinguish the blue from the gray, our members pretty much all over Europe. We've been around almost for 60 years, not me personally, and we represent indirectly through our members more than 6,000 individual publishers. We're based in Brussels. And again, what we do, apart from pestering the politicians so that they treat the book sector well, is to try and collect data from our members. I'm then quite creative in filling the gaps with some imagination, and which leads me to remind you of the disclaimer of every time. Don't believe anyone who tells you data about the book sector, because nobody really knows, but we are able, some of us, Nielsen as well, to collect enough to present a pretty reliable story. So that's what I'll give you today. So first of all, the macro data, the core data. Turnover. So we are, for 2024, book publishers' net turnover in Europe was just shy of 25 billion euros. We remain most likely the largest cultural industry in Europe, and 2024 showed the biggest turnover ever. Previously, we had a peak in 2007 with 24.5 billion. That was passed last year with a small increase of 2.2% over 2023. We are on almost 25 billion. You see the 20-year trend after the financial crisis in 2008. There was a bit of stagnation for many years. Then came COVID, which was bad, but not as bad altogether as we feared, although it has introduced a number of vulnerabilities that still remain. We'll see some of that later. Then there was a big rebound in 2021, possibly because people couldn't yet go to many places, but they could go to bookstores, fortunately. And so there was quite a spike in turnover in 2021. And then for the past 3 years, what we have seen is modest increase in value, mostly a decrease, again, not big, but a decrease in volume, and the increase in value driven by price increases, although we'll see also that prices do not keep up with the inflation. And talking about inflation, one of the most important novelties of the presentation of the last couple of years is what does this picture look like if we introduce inflation? And this is what it looks like, not this way. And this is what it looks like. So looking at real terms, it's not super scientific. What I did was to deflate turnover based on the general rate of inflation in the EU. So it's kind of an approximation, but still gives the idea. Nominal turnover is just shy of 25 billion, but in real terms, compared to 2004, we are on 15.5 billion. So maybe this warrants a reflection. It's not that the sector is in crisis. We see that it's not in crisis, but there is something about profitability that probably warrants some kind of conversation. This is the market value, so sales at cover price. Of course, the trend is very similar to that of net turnover, and we're talking about, by now, about 36 billion. So that's the equivalent market value of the sales of European publishers. You still have to add maybe a couple billion, that is imports, so that the total market is between 36 and 39 billion euros per year. Number of titles, we saw an almost constant increase until 2017, then a bit of up and down. COVID did dampen the growth of new titles. So we're talking about, by now, 580,000 new titles per year. So as I always say, it's not that there's nothing to read. Believe me, there's a lot to choose from. Maybe the difficulty is to find the good stuff. But that's why we have booksellers, for example, to help you find the good stuff. We've seen maybe a rationalization in the number of titles because they're not picking up again and not going back to 600,000. So it might be that in some countries, publishers are trying to focus on a smaller number of titles. And now one of the most important novelties, although it's not good news, of this year is that we have been able to present number of units, so sales in volume, since 2021. So this is data from a smaller sample of countries, but big countries. We have consumer books in Germany, consumer books in Italy. We have Spain, France, the UK, Finland, and Portugal. All in all, these make up about 75% of turnover, so it's quite representative. And we see in these 4 years, 2021 to 2024, well, number of units has gone down about 5%, which corresponds to some 95 million fewer print copies sold. With a bit of luck, we'll be able to maintain this timeline and this data point for the coming years, and maybe from next year I'll try to project it into the total number of copies sold, which anyway remains for the time being somewhat above 2.5 billion individual books sold, which still is quite impressive, and I like to imagine that amount of books being read by Europeans. But so yeah, we have a bit of decrease after COVID of the number of copies sold. This is the available catalog. We're on about 14.3 million different titles available. This is sometimes the same title in different languages, translations. It includes also different formats. Close to 3.5 million titles are available in some digital format, ebooks or audiobooks. So again, there's a lot out there to read. The ranking for turnover and titles is more or less the same every year, with maybe 1 or 2 countries going up or down. So biggest country for turnover is Germany. Biggest country for titles is the UK. And now a bit of a breakdown by category. For most of these years when we've been doing our analysis, We see children's books have been doing very well. They did extremely well, especially during the pandemic, because clearly at some point parents wanted kids to do something else than being in front of the TV or on their phone. Children's books reached 15% of the total turnover in 2021. We've seen a bit of a slowdown. Children's books are still doing well, but not everywhere, not as much as they used to until a few years ago. One reason might be that maybe kids are not reading as much as before, but there's another reason that is not so obvious, but it will become more and more evident. We have simply fewer kids. In a lot of countries, like Italy, for example, my country, we have fewer kids. So if you have fewer kids, you can sell more books to children if there are fewer children, yeah. So exports represent still about 20% of turnover for publishers. Of course, big differences. It's extremely important for British publishers. It's very important for Spanish, for French publishers, for German. For others, not so much. And we saw a bit of a slowdown of exports during COVID, obviously, and then the export recovered, and we're around 20%. Trade channels, the return to bookstores is continuing, although at a slightly maybe slower pace. But sales in bookshops are around 48% of publishers' turnover, not yet at the level of 2019, so the pre-pandemic, but we're hopefully getting there. In parallel, online sales, which were almost at 30% in 2021, have been decreasing also gradually. And again, we do hope that more and more people go back to physical bookstores to buy their books. And then formats, something that, again, we've been able to introduce and analyze for the last few years. Print books remain by far the largest source of income for publishers, with about 83% of the total. Again, behind this kind of data, there are huge differences between sectors, between segments, with scientific publishing being almost completely digital, and, for example, children's books almost completely in print, and everything in between. The phenomenon of the last few years, well, no surprise, is audiobooks. It might not look like a lot, but already having gone from 2.5% to 4.2% in 3 years means a huge increase. Plus, I guarantee you that this is underestimated, because by now, almost all audiobooks are sold via subscriptions, often in mixed services. Basically, if you sell audiobooks via Spotify, how do you measure that when people are simply paying a Spotify subscription? So one thing I know for sure, that data is underestimated. And still, the growth and the size that the audiobook market has reached, especially in certain countries, is definitely impressive. We'll see more about that. Bit of Eurostat data, just because it's been updated. So just to point out that almost 15% of people in the EU buy print books online. So also a great driver of e-commerce. This complements what I told you about inflation and book prices. In the last 20 years, general inflation increased 64%, whereas book prices increased only 38%. So there is a gap between book prices and the general prices. For example, in 2023, general inflation was 6.4%, which was pretty high. Book prices increased 4%, but that was still below inflation. So again, something to take into account. Publishers are not very keen to increase the price of books, despite what some people think. So a couple of considerations that I like to bring up. What does this all mean for the profitability of the business? Because we've had many years in which the number of titles increased, but not the turnover, which a simple equation means less money per title. Prices not keeping up with inflation. The increasing share of digital with different business models means different things for profitability. the rise of second-hand market, which has become extremely relevant in countries like France, where I think even 1 out of 4 or 5 books sold is a second-hand book, which is massive. And the rise of reading in original language, especially in English, which again is kind of changing a bit the cards on the table. Couple of minutes, I'd like to talk about reading, because without readers, there's no point for any of us being here. Not apparently great news. We see all over the place, from the US to France, Italy, UK, Germany. There is some concern, there is a perception that people are not reading as much as they used to. But for me, the most important problem is that we have a hard time measuring reading as well. We've been sort of praying for Eurostat, the European Statistical Office, to measure the level of reading, because they can do it for the whole of Europe. And finally, they did, and we are already unhappy about the result. Not so much because it turns out that 47.2% of Europeans are not readers, which is already bad enough, but also we have some doubts about the data. Like, take Italy, again, my country. I mean, okay, we might not be the biggest reader in the world, granted, but we're not as bad as having only 35% or 37% of readers. So there is something missing from the data. One thing you can see immediately, the survey is on people age 16 and above. That takes out all the children who read, actually still a lot, especially smaller children, that age 6, 7, 8, up to 10 at least. So there is something with, but still that there might be 40-something% of adults that don't read is something that should concern us. And there's a lot more in the survey that's interesting. For example, the number of people who don't read increases with age, although elderly people are also among the strong readers. But at least people from 16 to 29, there's only 40% of non-readers, and we hope that they keep the habit of reading when they then change age bracket. As I always say, men should learn from women. Only 40% of women don't read. 55% of men don't read. Shame on us. Well, I read a lot, but still, I participate, guilty by association. Then some more interesting stuff. Readers by education, urbanization, or risk of poverty. Well, no surprises, but it's interesting to see. It's staggering. 68% of people with the low level of education don't read, whereas only 23% of people with a university degree don't read. So you want to make people read, give them an education, or the other way around, make them read so that they get an education. People tend to read more in cities, but I don't think that the solution is to move everyone into cities. Maybe bring more bookstores to rural areas. That could be. And then, again, no surprises, people who are at risk of poverty have also a bigger proportion of non-readers, about 60%. But, and that's also, I think, very interesting, this same survey is the reasons why people don't read. Financial reasons, as in books are too expensive, 1.8%. That is not the problem. The price of books doesn't seem to be the problem, doesn't seem to be the reason why people don't read. Difficulty, only 0.6%. Probably people are also ashamed to say that they're not able to read, but I guess that we can be happy that in Europe it's not a huge problem. At the same time, it's sad to see that half of the people who don't read simply say that they don't care. So we don't need to make books cheaper. We need to make books sexier somehow. I don't know. I love books already, so I don't know what else I could do, but that's also interesting to see. Then, okay, of course, in today's society, 20% of people have no time to read, although 10 minutes per day would be more than enough. But again, some points for reflection. And now the most colorful part, the maps that I hope we all love. So this is what happened in 2024. You see pretty much is the the breaking down in country by country of what we saw. So a total of a small increase with few exceptions. More or less everywhere we're just above, just below zero. Spain doing quite well. Poland, for once, did quite well last year. But all in all, we see more or less the usual. Value slightly up, volume slightly down. Not everywhere. Volume is going up still in Spain and Portugal. That's at least some good news. And most of the increase in turnover being driven by prices. If we look at just the change in print book sales, the picture is more or less the same, but we start seeing that in the Nordics, things are a bit different. We'll see it more in the comparison with 2019. Interestingly, first signs of slowing down of the audiobook market, but again, that's more likely to be due to the difficulty in capturing the actual data than in an actual decrease of the consumption of audiobooks. But that somehow affects our data. Sales in physical stores recovering gradually, except in the Nordics, where all of the growth of the last few years has been digital and therefore, by definition, online. And sales online, which are in some countries picking up, in some countries still going down, as we saw also in the broader trend. And then the interesting, probably more interesting comparison with the famous last normal year before the pandemic. So turnover a lot higher in many countries, but not in all countries. And in just 5 years of high inflation, you see then that countries like France and Germany, for example, this increase in turnover was only nominal. For other countries, probably in the last 5 years, there has been a real growth, although we saw that the overall trend is a bit more questionable. And then print books, what we just said. Nordics, with the odd exception of Norway, print books are at a lower level than they were before the pandemic, because again, all growth has been digital. But look at the growth of audiobooks in places like Finland and Italy, more than 200%. So it has been really the phenomenon of the last few years. Sales in physical stores, they have not recovered yet everywhere, although we're hopefully getting there. And obviously, sales of print books online that have, well, that are still at a much higher level. This is plus just the trade segment, so the phenomenon is even more obvious than if you count for everything, like also education and academic and so on. Trends that what we see in 2025, but if you saw Nielsen's presentation, that's pretty much the same story. We see a bit of growth, again, mostly due to prices. A couple of countries, Italy, Germany, still struggling in the first few months. Finland doing quite well. That, again, is mainly digital. Spain, in any case, is doing pretty well. And Portugal is still also doing well. So we have a bit of positive phenomenon in the Iberian Peninsula. And because I want to leave you with a bit of good news to see that good stuff still happens. This is Spain for the last 12 years. It's the only big European market, I think the only European market altogether, that has been on a 12-year consecutive growth stretch, which led me to talk about the Spanish phenomenon. So, well, let's look at Spain. They're doing something good. And this, for the last 4 years, volume has gone up as well. So it's good news all around. And, well, they can only hope that many more countries get into somehow the Spanish model, and that in the next few years we can start talking again about real growth in the book sector, because it's well, essential for everyone to have a healthy book sector and to have people reading. So with only 1 minute to spare, I thank you once again for your attention. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next year.